Hey there, and you have found another episode of Austin Tech Connect. This is the official podcast of the Austin Technology Council. My name is Thom Singer, and as you know, if you're a regular listener to this show, I have been with ATC for 3 years, and 2.5 years ago, we started this show to bring to you interviews with interesting people in the world of tech in Austin who are doing things you may not have heard about, because the more we can learn about the different types of technologies that are being developed here, the more we can all succeed. And the more we get to learn about local entrepreneurs and executives who are making things happen, the better that is for all of us. And today I am really excited because we are joined by Joe Wolfel. He is the CEO of Terradepth. Hey, Joe, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate you having me.
So for those of you who don't know about Joe, he's a former Navy SEAL. And what he has done is he's taken all of the lessons from all of the years of military special operations combat, and he has brought it to the ocean, helping make the ocean more transparent through emerging technologies so that people can make better decisions. Really, in a simple term, what he's doing is he's building Google Earth for the oceans. And there's so much going on. We're going to explore why the oceans, what's important about the oceans, and learn a little bit about his background. But he's been here in Austin for 8 years. He's a native of the Chicago area, but we don't hold that against him because, like everybody, he got here as quick as he could. So, Joe, let's jump in. So you're a former Navy SEAL. You actually went to the Naval Academy. Let's go back to those days. When you went into the Navy, did you expect that you'd be this tech executive in one of the hottest tech hubs in the world?
Not at all.
So what led you to the Naval Academy?
I went to go join the Marine Corps and go enlist. And the recruiter must have hit his quota. So he said, "Hey, did you ever think about the Naval Academy?" And I said, "Not really, but sounds good. I'll check it out." And so I actually went to the Naval Academy to be a Marine.
Nice. And it's not easy to be a Navy SEAL. Let's talk a little bit about that. What's the process really like besides what we see on like reality TV?
Yeah. So for me, it started by getting my eyes fixed with surgery at school.
Little LASIK at the academy?
Yeah. Except they give you PRK because they don't like that flap. So they just vaporize your eyeball. So it's been one piece of scar tissue. So once my eyes were fixed, I was eligible. And there's some de facto screening processes you've got to get through at school because there's 16 slots a year. And so if you get through all that, then you become eligible, and then you go to what's called BUDS. It's basic underwater demolition / SEAL. And that's where a lot of the weeding out starts. So I'm sure folks have maybe seen a book or two or a movie about all of that.
A lot of people don't make it. I don't know what the percentage is, but there's a lot of people who don't make it through that school.
Yeah, it's between 80 and 90%
that don't make it. Right. Yeah.
Correct.
So you made it, and then what was your military career like?
Yeah, so I was an officer, which meant I got bounced around quite a bit. But spent a lot of time in Iraq, spent a decent amount of time in Africa, did a few deployments over there. So I was fortunate to have a really broad personal experience. So everything from ground combat roles to strategic planning roles to strategic coordination roles. So spent a lot of time overseas and got a lot of really broad exposure to a lot of really great people and a lot of really great experiences.
So how long was your active duty career?
It's about 7 years active.
And then when did you get out?
2012.
So it is interesting because did you go right into entrepreneurship or what did you do next?
Yeah, so I was very fortunate. I had the opportunity to go to a place called the McChrystal Group. And that was a consulting company founded by a general that I actually used to work for about 30 layers down in Joint Special Operations Command at one point. But yeah, General Stan McChrystal. So once he retired, he started this consulting company, which was basically designed to take lessons learned from Joint Special Operations Command specifically, and then translate that to the civilian world. And some of that stuff translates, some of that stuff doesn't, and you've got to know the difference.
So it is interesting because I've interviewed a lot of people over 2.5 years of doing the show who are, entrepreneurs and company leaders here in town who are growing different types of technology who come out of the military. Why do you think so many former military people are able to go into this world of high growth technology entrepreneurship?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think personally, it's because the military, and especially if you're fortunate or unfortunate, I guess, depending on your perspective, to spend some time in interesting places and do interesting things in high risk, mission critical situations. You learn to rely on very simple mental models and then adapt from that mental model to the situation at hand. And at its core, that's what high growth entrepreneurship looks like, because you don't know what's going to happen day to day, and you're probably doing something very new, and you're going to have to adapt from basically what's not working, which is what happens most of the time when you're in a fight.
No, definitely. And like I said, I've interviewed a lot of people, and they credit exactly what you've said. They also credit just the basic discipline that it takes to run a company. And, I guess the military is known for having a little bit of discipline.
A little bit. Yeah. SEALs, not so much sometimes.
I've seen the movies. You're right. So let's talk one more question about sort of that stage of your life. What are some of the most interesting personal leadership lessons that you took from your active duty career?
Yeah, take into account extenuating circumstances and always bend towards the family/employee, right? People are dealing with a whole lot more than you probably know. So having a little grace in your leadership perspective can tend to go a long way, especially as you're building what's probably starting out as a small team.
So let's switch over now to the company that you're running. How did the company get started? How long have you been there? And let's go kind of deep on that.
Yeah. So while I was at the McChrystal Group, I became the project lead for a client called Seagate Technologies. They make about half the world's data storage, hard disk drive manufacturer. And during that time, I had the opportunity to spend a lot of time in Silicon Valley and internationally to see how emerging technologies were interacting with the data ecosystem, rather. And so to make a very long story short, I became close with the Seagate leadership. We had a lot of interesting and cool things over there. I was having a discussion about their strategy going forward, and specifically what this data value chain could look like. So how are people interacting with data from the creation of data to the consumption of it, the storage of it, and talking about a lot of opportunities there. And a lot of the technologies we were talking about was, it was all every buzzword: cloud compute, high performance compute, distributed compute, blah, 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 blah. And a lot of those words imply bandwidth constraint. Like, why would I do stuff at the edge unless I had to? And so I made the comment, well, we don't know anything about the ocean, and we've had a couple submarines run into underwater mountains in the Navy that a lot of people don't know about because they look at Google Earth.
I was going to say that doesn't hit the news very often.
Yeah. You can look it up. USS San Francisco in 2005, the entire bow is basically ripped off. But terrible situation. One person died. Everybody got hurt pretty much. And we run into stuff because we don't know what's down there. Mm-hmm. And when you look at Google Earth and you see the bottom of the ocean, that's all extrapolated data from wave height. So I said, look, I think there's a massive opportunity to go collect ocean data at scale. You're going to have to deal with all the operations because the ocean's a really hard place to operate. But if you can aggregate that data, put it in one spot within a modern software architecture, you're probably going to save the planet because we can fully understand the 70% of Earth's surface area that we don't right now.
So why is it that the oceans have been such a mystery, right? We've been to space since the 60s. We're going back to space on a pretty active level right now. Why is it that the oceans have been maybe a little bit, not mapped in the past?
Because it's the opposite of space from a physics perspective. It's the very simple answer. The more complicated answer is it's a high pressure environment, highly corrosive, highly dynamic, so it breaks stuff. And you can launch as many satellites as you want to into space and get these high resolution pictures of the Earth, but you're never going to penetrate more than 10 meters in the water because all that energy either gets reflected or sucked up, attenuated in that vertical depth. And so you've actually got to be in the water to go get the data, which means you got people out on ships or you got to launch a bunch of robots. And that stuff's really hard to do and it's very expensive.
So you start the company and you're starting to gather this data. What year was that?
We got funded October 2nd, 2018. It's a big day.
So seven, coming up on 7 years, seventh birthday around the corner here. So How many employees do you have now? And then let's talk about the day to day.
Yep. We've got just shy of 50 employees at Teradepth now. So day to day looks like a whole lot of vertically integrated frenetic activity. So we're doing three things actually, because that's what's required to do what we just talked about, which is create Google Earth for the ocean. So one, you got to create the software architecture that would be the Google Earth equivalent that makes it really easy for people to upload, download, visualize, share, collaborate on, sell ocean data. And that does not exist. So built that, a lot of software dev. We're actually out doing active ocean data collection operations right now using a variety of robotic systems. So, for example, we're going to go do a survey in the next 2 weeks for a major oil and gas company, and we're going to map their terminal that sits across the world that they haven't been able to get mapped yet. And then the second thing we do is we do a ton of innovation around making ocean-going robots stay out longer without a person having to interact with them, because that's the big limiting factor. So significant hardware component on that front, significant ocean testing component, ocean operations component, and pure software cloud DevSecOps component.
So you mentioned oil and gas companies are hiring you to do some of this mapping. So who else? I mean, why does this company exist? I mean, who is oil and gas makes total sense to me right off that, but who else? Who needs what you have?
So basically, if you're somebody who's going to put something down on the ocean floor, pick it up, or needs to know what's there or not, you're going to care about the data that we collect and we allow people to upload into the cloud or keep private to the extent that they want to. So think about offshore wind companies, oil and gas pipeline operators, submarine fiber optic installers and operators. If you are a government, so for example, we did a survey for NOAA in the Gulf for aquaculture, whether or not that was going to be a good place to set up an aquaculture farm. If you're a government, say, who has a ton of ocean data holdings and doesn't have anywhere to put them except for hard disk drives in a safe with a sticky note, you're going to be able to buy our data architecture to essentially allow for processing, exploitation, dissemination with that data. So you're unlocking a lot of latent power in data holdings with respect to people who have them already.
So here's a question. If there's a lot of people who already have data and they've got it on just a hard drive with a sticky on it stuck in a closet, a lot of these places are governments maybe, or things along those lines. How do you get them to give you the data? What's in their best interest to share this data? Because so often people are they're very proprietary about their data.
For sure. And that data was expensive to collect in the first place. So it's by definition a precious asset. Short answer, you've got to make it worth their while. There's got to be this incentive structure that, again, unless you've really got a platform that unlocks the power of that data. So if it's government, maybe that's not monetary, but maybe it's getting other people's eyeballs on it who need to make good decisions. How are we getting speed at the point of tactical, operational relevance to decision makers in NOAA, for example? If you're mailing hard disk drives around the world, that's not happening. Which, believe it or not, that happens every single day. We've got a few clients on the commercial side who are shipping hard disk drives, and they were getting stuck in customs because they wanted them processed in another country, or they wanted the data processed in another country.
So this whole idea of the sea, it's going through some transformation. Been prepping to talk to you today. I didn't realize that this whole idea of sort of subsea as an industry is going through this big transformation. So where do you fit into this? And are there a lot of people in this industry?
Yeah, great question. So the industry has traditionally been pretty laggardy because if you think about how data was previously collected, and candidly still is for the most part, it's these big 85-meter long offshore support vessels with people on them. They've got multi-decade depreciation cycles. Why are you going to change that? That is changing rapidly. We're seeing a lot of uptake in the space, and there's a huge opportunity to transform this entire ecosystem with what we're seeing come piece. I mean, you've got a couple maritime autonomy companies in Austin right now, and there's no ocean here.
Well, that's actually a question I wrote down for later when we switch over to Austin is why are you in Austin? And we'll get back to that in just a second. But, Austin does have this hugely quickly growing space tech piece. And in prepping to talk to you today, I found out there's also smaller, but also here, ocean tech, for lack of a better term. So why is it happening in Austin? Or is this like a lot of things that once one is there, others come, and there's power in numbers? Why are there so many ocean researchers in Austin?
I think it is multiple things. I mean, a lot of, to your point about space companies, a lot of the skill sets required to deploy something to space, even though that is an opposite environment in a lot of cases, are the same skill sets that you need to hire for. We're talking about advanced autonomy, and we're talking about getting a whole lot of data from somewhere far away to humans' brains at the end of the day. So I think that's one piece of it. The other piece is a lot of people want to move to Austin. At the end of the day, my co-founder and I were here, and we just moved our families here, and it made a ton of sense. We knew that we were going to have an ocean location at some point, but not day one.
So do you have an ocean location now?
We do.
And what are they doing on a daily basis?
So they're supporting both the testing operations on the hardware side. So we've got our own robotics roadmap that we've obviously got to get out in the water and test for. And this is around self-recharging technology. So we've created tech there that I can get into if we care about it, but we're putting those assets out to sea, testing those, breaking them, and then fixing them and making them better. And we also operate a variety of other people's assets because, again, there's so much to do in this space and there's so many people entering it. I don't think there's one company that's going to solve the quote unquote ocean data collection problem. We're addressing a specific niche. Other people are doing a great job addressing other niches. And so we'll lease or buy their equipment to go operate in support of, locations and customers where it makes sense. So we're always testing those before we go out on operation, for example.
So some industry verticals are super competitive and some are super collaborative. Are you finding everybody in your sort of, I don't want to say orbit, that's the wrong terminology. You're finding everybody in your circle, in your swimming pool. Are you finding everybody in your pool on the collaborative side then for what you just said?
No. Some are and some are not, right? You've got folks outlaid across a fairly wide spectrum. I think probably like most industries, and some of that comes down to personality, and some of that comes down to don't want to change.
So, in thinking about this, like I said, a lot of people are getting a lot of attention, from Elon Musk, across the spectrum with all the space stuff. Why not as much attention? Why am I not seeing so much stuff written up in the tech news about the stuff that you and your competitors and other collaborative companies in your industry? Why not so much attention on what's being done? Obviously, there's a big push to map the oceans and be able to better understand them.
I've been asked this question a lot, and I've always struggled with this, partly because of where I sit and partly based on some of the data. So, little known fact, we are the only maritime company that's ever gone through the AWS Space Accelerator. Great experience, great opportunity. And one of the data points that was put out in that process was we anticipate the space economy to be about 1.5 trillion by 2040. The blue economy, the ocean economy, is 3 trillion right now.
So is that the term? Is that the correct term? The blue economy?
That's the generally accepted blue economy, which is obviously massive. So in the face of that, well, okay, what's going on here? I think there's a couple of reasons. One is a little bit fluffier than the other one. The fluffy one is high net worth people grew up watching different TV, right? I mean, grew up watching Star Trek, Star Wars, and there's this fascination with space, and you can see it. You look up at the stars, and you can see those. You look at the ocean; it's at night. It's this big, dark, scary thing. And I also think a lot of people believe that we've explored it too. You look at Google Earth, and you can see the bottom of the ocean, and you go, "Okay, it's done." That's one piece. The more concrete piece is the traditional financing bases for the ocean economy have been national governments and oil and gas. Mm-hmm. And both of those finance bases and the associated procurement systems, because they're also the customers, are extraordinarily requirements driven. So what'll happen is you want to start a company and you've got this big idea, Google Earth for the ocean. And I go, great, but I would like to see a better propeller on that robot. So go ahead and make that one first. And then before you know it, you're just making propellers. Gotcha. And nobody funded to take this big swing because you get essentially divvied up into these very narrow verticals.
Well, it is interesting when you said, sort of the other side, that people grew up watching all these, space launches, the space shuttle, all that stuff, as well as all the science fiction. And when I started thinking about like TV shows that took place in the ocean, there was Flipper, there was, Man from Atlantis with Patrick Duffy lasted like, I think, one season back in the 80s. So, right. There's been a lot more attention to that. That being said, where do you see this industry going? What is your thoughts of where we're going to see this blue tech going in the future?
Yeah, I think you're going to see rapid acceleration, and it's always hard for me to say that because confirmation bias is obviously a real thing, and I've been looking at this now for 7 years, at least. That said, I do think the ocean is becoming a more accessible place based on a lot of the advancements that we're seeing in robotic technology at large, not necessarily in the ocean space, but there's a lot that we can learn from what's going on in terrestrial environments and, self-driving vehicles, for example, and some of the concepts there and how that technology has been deployed and is being deployed in a reliable way. Because that's what the ocean needs. It needs reliable, autonomy-driven technology in one case. And then on the data side, we've seen a ton of advancements with respect to cloud compute, distributed compute, and all these different technologies that really weren't accessible, even when we started the company 7 years ago. So I think there's a lot out there that's starting to unlock the ocean space. I do think there is a lot of focus on the maritime sector as we look at the current geopolitical environment, right? And resources become more scarce. There's this huge conversation right now on ocean resources. Do we take them? Do we not take them? Where do we take them from? Who owns them if we take them? How do we deploy into these environments? And if you don't have a good map, you can't answer any of those questions. And so I do think that's starting to become more of a discrete conversation than we saw 7 years ago.
So the other thing is when I think of news, air quotes around news about the ocean, a lot of it has to do with sort of the ecology of the ocean, about conservation, about, are the oceans dying? Are we polluting the oceans? Big things of plastic in the ocean. How does the research that you do and some of the other companies that are in this blue tech affect, saving the oceans?
Yeah, it helps you balance human needs and, frankly, wants with long-term sustainability of the planet. Do you want your kids to have a good place to live or not? And, you can see a lot of interesting weather patterns, a lot of cities now being very concerned about rising sea levels, things like that. And again, if you do not have relatively agnostic data collection capability, cheap, and a place to put that data where you can get multiple diverse stakeholders taking a look at common data sets, you will make suboptimal decisions in that balance.
So anything else before we switch topics here a little bit? Anything else that you wish people knew about what your company is doing and about, sort of the whole, blue tech arena?
No, I think you did a good job covering it.
So let's switch gears, right? I made a reference to this before, that one of my questions was, Joe, you're an ocean company that you founded in Austin, and I've lived here 34 years. Now, I grew up in Southern California. I love a good ocean, but there's no ocean. So you sort of touched on it, but that you were here. But why Austin, and why are there some other companies here? And then why is Austin a great place to be sort of an innovative entrepreneur?
Yeah. I think Austin is unique in the sense that you can choose your own adventure here. Right? You're in a conservative state, in a liberal city. You've got a very diverse group of humans who are attracted to Austin, which gives you, in my opinion, the kind of talent pool that you want to see. And it goes back to what I said previously. I mean, one of the things you learn, I think, pretty rapidly in combat is you're facing these very ambiguous, complex, complicated problem sets. And the only way to start solving those is to get those multiple diverse perspectives, taking a look at the information that's coming at you so that you can understand problems so intuitively that solutions become apparent. And I think Austin is just a good conceptual place to do that, which is why I think you see a range of very diverse companies in Austin. I mean, I took a look at the folks that are on the Austin Tech Council. That is a very diverse group of 7,000 members.
Yeah. Well, we're trying hard to get more and more companies, involved in supporting what we're doing. And we don't just want to be software, right? We don't just want to be semiconductor. If you go back to the beginning, we were founded as the Austin Software Council. And previous to that, Austin was a semiconductor town. But if you look at Austin now, there are so many verticals that are popping up. There's space tech, there's fintech, there's medtech. I mean, there's, 15 different verticals that are actually thriving here. If we don't have an organization that can touch all of them, right? You can have a fintech group, and that's great. There's a time and a place to get together with the people in your group, or, a space tech get together group. That's fantastic. But if we don't have those groups talking to each other, I think we miss out on the serendipity that happens. And that's why we're trying with the Austin Technology Council not to be all things to all people, because if any group wants to be the group, it hurts the ecosystem. But I say, the analogy I use is, we want to be a thread. We want to be a thread that supports, whether they're members or not, whether they sponsor our stuff or not. We want to support everybody who supports tech. And that comes to the other nonprofits, but then also the companies who are doing innovative things. How do we help everybody be better in Austin? Because that helps create a better Austin.
Yep. I couldn't agree more.
So what do you think our tech ecosystem as a whole does well? And maybe where are some areas that Austin needs to be aware of?
Yeah, I think the piece that Austin does really well is the collaborative side of it that you touched on previously. I think folks are very collaborative here, just geographically speaking, based on that condition I articulated before, right? Especially as you get other places in the country and you get into these entrenched environments, that's not the case so much. So I think that's the standout piece for me with respect to Austin, plus beer and tacos, which helps the collaboration piece.
And if you can eat your weight in beer, tacos, and brisket, why would you want to live anywhere else?
Exactly. I mean, people travel here for that stuff. As far as what I think this spot could do better, I do see a lot of financing. Yeah, I'll give you $50,000 for 10% of your company. Build me a new app. I do see a lot of that. The hardware side of the house is so much more expensive, especially when you're going into, what I would call mission critical environments, where if you lose the thing, you're done, right? Especially early stages. So as far as attracting more capital here to enable these kind of, the word that's coming to mind is moonshot, but there's a company, I'm not talking about moonshot capital, but to enable these moonshots, that's what I could see this place doing a little bit better.
Yeah.
Sure.
I mean, I tell everybody, look, we call ourselves, the term tech hub gets thrown around a lot. I prefer innovation center, but in reality, what I've been telling everybody lately is we have to remember that Austin is a science city. And a lot of the technologies that we're developing here go deep into a variety of different types of science. And a lot of that to fund and grow companies around, these sort of deep tech sciences, it's going to take money. It's going to take time. And so it's not the 90s where you could start a software company and take it public in 3 years. This is a long haul that we're doing here. And I think as a community, I think we need to come together more. We need to be looking long future, not 5 years, not 10 years, but 30 years out into the future, and then figuring out how do we support the companies that are trying to grow here.
Absolutely. I mean, what I see specifically is a difference between some of the narrative and the reality that I do think will be closed. Question is, how fast can you close it? To your point, GovTech, autonomy, deep tech, hard tech, whatever you want to call it. It takes money and it takes time.
Yep. And, I always say that, this community was built because the civic-minded leaders showed up. And, I remind everybody all the time is, if you don't show up in the community, you can't be a leader. But the other side of that is if you show up, the serendipity of who you could meet, you're not going to make a great connection at every networking event or, every community event that you go to. But if you go to enough of them, and I realize people are busy, you can't go to everything. But if you're not showing up in the community every other week, I think you're missing out, because I think that at something that's going on in the community, you could find your next employee, your next investor, your next co-founder, your next idea, or you could find a company that it's like, wow, you're doing something entirely different. But if we partnered, we create something new. And over my 34 years in Austin, I've seen that happen, and I'm seeing it happen less because we're not having that cross-pollination that we used to have.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting.
So as we wrap this up, any final words, any thoughts for the general community who listens to Austin Tech Connect?
No, first, I just want to say I appreciate what you're doing, right? Connecting people leads to good things, right? I mean, we have this discussion a lot, and we get questions a lot and pushback sometimes from the conservation community on, okay, well, if you make the ocean a more transparent place and you allow people to see the sea, I guess, we're going to make crappy decisions and we're going to ruin the planet, because that's what people do. And I mean, that's not my experience, despite, doing some hard things in some hard places. And, I do believe that people will make better, faster decisions on balance with greater accessibility to data, right? And if you tend to think otherwise, then we're doomed anyway, and you might as well just cash it in. So,
along that, I'm going to ask another question. Do you think the next generation, so my daughter is a recent graduate of Dartmouth. She was an environmental biology major, and her focus is land sustainability. And do you think her generation, she's 23, do you think that generation has a different outlook than maybe ours did? Do you think that generation's going to be the ones who save the planet, the oceans, the world?
I definitely think they have a different outlook, because everybody does. To answer your question, potentially.
That's a fair answer.
Yeah, well, it's kind of a non-answer, but what I saw this happen post 9/11. Everybody's like, oh, everybody's this new generation. We were so much harder, smarter. We had it tougher. Therefore we were better off, and we're all screwed. And that didn't happen, right? So why would I think the same thing right now? And I don't believe that. So
that's actually a fair statement. I said that same thing to somebody else who said the baby boomers were going to change the world for the better, and they might be the ones who've heard it. And I laughed, and I said, oh, well, I'm not going to say that, but that made me laugh.
Right. So, bottom line, I don't know, but I hope so. And I'm hopeful.
Nice. Well, Joe, it was a pleasure to meet you and to have you on the show. I hope to see more of you around Austin and more of Terradepth.
Yes, sir. I appreciate it.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to everybody who tuned in and listened. Say it every week. If it wasn't for the audience, why would we do the show? I'm going to assume most of you listening had never heard of Terradepth before this call. And that's what we're looking for every single week. If you know a company that's doing real things in a real unique spot right here in Austin and helping plant a flag that says, look, Austin is all kinds of tech, I want to know about them and I want to have them on the show. So please reach out and let us know, and make sure you're sharing Austin Tech Connect with all your friends and coworkers in Austin, because We want to make sure that everybody isn't just got goggles on for what they're doing, but they realize that Austin is a very diverse tech hub, innovation center, and science city, because that's what we are. We'll see you back here next week with another episode of Austin Tech Connect.